Good afternoon. Welcome to the members of the media present, and of course to all those joining us, listening and looking at us across all the various platforms that this post-CAB press conference is being carried on. Before we begin, I would just like to make the announcement that the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has been officially informed of the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. It is my duty to obviously convey our deepest sympathies. The necessary official correspondence will be conveyed from the Office of the Prime Minister to the Government of Britain and to Prime Minister Truss, and of course the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs has already been in contact with the British High Commissioner. Once the funeral arrangements are finalized, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago will be represented, and any other information will be conveyed to the public via the Office of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. Again, our deepest condolences, and I ask just for a brief moment of silence before we continue. Thank you very much. So, we are here today for our post-cabinet press briefing. I have been joined by Minister of Digital Transformation, Senator the Honourable Hassel Bacchus, as well as our Minister of Education, Dr. the Honourable Nyan Gatsby-Dolly. We are here to speak on issues, decisions that have been made at Cabinet, and I would want to go straight into it, and I think I will start with Minister Bacchus, who will speak to you. After that, Minister Gatsby-Dolly will, and then we will have questions. Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Minister, and good afternoon to everyone. It is not usual for me to be at the post-cabinet meeting, and so maybe I should just give a small update on what we've been doing at the Ministry of Digital Transformation, and that will flow naturally into what we were able to do, some of the things that were approved at Cabinet today. The Ministry of Digital Transformation was formed on July 12th last year, so we're just over a year old. And I gave the Ministry a particular mandate in terms of what we set out to do in our digital transformation thrust. And that was to create a new way to address the delivery, the end-to-end delivery and consumption of goods and services for customers using appropriate digital technology. What that means is that we're doing things differently. We are doing things end-to-end, meaning that the processes that we're building are new digital processes that will take us from one place to the next. We are embracing customers, and customers as opposed to citizens, because citizens form part of the customer base. But to elaborate on that a bit, it simply means that if you're accessing a government service, for example, while the citizen may be consuming the service, the customer base also includes the public officer who is delivering the service. So that's why we talk about it from end to end. Of course, we're talking about using appropriate digital technology. Not all technology is appropriate, and of course, if you put something into the market that is not fit for purpose, obviously it doesn't fulfill the ends that you want. That is really the thrust of what we put together. In doing that, we know we had to affect 4 specific areas. You hear 3 sometimes, I still use 4. People, process, plant and I'll call it technology, or systems if you wish. And lastly, of course, legislation and the law. So in all of our endeavors, we have to make sure that we address all of those things to ensure that the transformation is successful. Further to that, we have 3 fundamental pillars in which we operate in that transformation. So we're talking about the digital society, the digital economy, and digital government. And under those pillars would be all the initiatives that the ministry and other ministries would have been engaged in. The Ministry of Digital Transformation is very cognizant that it cannot achieve the digital mandate that it has in terms of transforming Trinidad and Tobago on its own. We are a ministry of partnerships. We work with international organizations. We work with all the ministries, divisions, and agencies that make up the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We work with civil society. I work with Minister Dolly quite often, as recently as this morning. So I mean, this is not just at the level of ministers speaking, but at the root and fundamental level of ICT implementation and the furtherance of the digital agendas of those individual ministries as well. So we are kind of the glue that hubs and keeps it all together. Just to give again a brief piece of what those three pillars look like, digital society is all about you. Digital society is what enables us to raise the level of understanding of ICT technology across the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago, everyone. Because if we're going to build a digital society, you must be able to understand it and use it, or else people will be left behind. So that starts at the most basic level and extends beyond that. We're talking about, in the last budget speech, the Honorable Minister of Finance identified broadband as a public good. What that means is that broadband must be ubiquitous across Trinidad and Tobago. Wherever you are, whatever you want to do, broadband should be available for you. It must be available, it must be robust, it must be capable, it must be resilient. Again, initiatives are on the way to deal with those things. We, of course, can't leave any of our less fortunate behind. Even so, we partnered with civil society, with ALTA. We're hoping to partner with the Blind Society, Blind Welfare Society, etc. All of that is to make sure that when we introduce technology, it is not something that people are scared of. In terms of digital government, well, let's leave digital government for last. Digital economy. We're trying to increase the contribution of the ICT sector to GDP. That's really what we're trying to do. And, you know, unlike the energy sector where the resources are kind of easy, and it's oil, it's gas, it's things what's happening in the petchem, etc., and the transformation of that. The greatest resource we have in terms of what we're doing with ICT are our people. It's the people. We have tremendous resources in our people, and the way in which we're going to harness that, one of the ways we're going to harness it by, for example, is the creation of the Developers Hub. The Developers Hub is an ecosystem that the state is partnering with the private sector to build, and our international partners, that will allow for all of our people of various qualifications, but basically people who are creative at heart, to be able to use the latest technology to bring those things into viable products. And not just to create them into products that will sit there, but also because of those partnerships, create markets for them, have them visible for people who have money to invest. All of that is what is going to happen in the developers, as an example of where we're going with that. And all of those things will eventually contribute to the national GDP. When we go to digital government, which is really the key piece of where the ministry itself has projects as opposed to working with all the other ministries, there's some things that we have to do there, and that really embodies the idea of making things easier for our customers. We're working on projects to build a national identity to identify you as you, to all things that you wish to do relative to the state and eventually to the private sector. We're building a robust and reliable and resilient network for the exchange of information between ministries, divisions, and agencies, so that when you walk into anywhere or when you use your technology anywhere to be able to access a service, you don't have to walk from ministry to ministry to do it. And this is the exchange of appropriate information, not any information, but only appropriate information. We're talking about the development of a support function. If you are trying to access one of the over 100 digital services that are available now to you as a citizen, and you have a problem with it, you must have a place where you can go to and seek help and guidance and assistance, or if necessary, have them executed for you. All of those things are encompassing what we're trying to achieve, so that when you roll it up together, the destination of digital transformation will be something that is achievable. In doing that, we need a lot of resources. We partner with various international technical institutions, but also we need funding. You would have heard recently the Minister of Finance and CAF announce a piece of what we do, but we still have significant interest and work going on with the IDB, who has provided us with tremendous resources and funding as well. We're working with the Caribbean Development Bank. We're working with the International Telecommunications Union, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, and of course the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization. So at Cabinet, I got I was good to have some approvals relative to some travel that the technical teams associated with the Ministry of Digital Transformation will be embarking with. Really, there are 4 key meetings and initiatives, and meetings, initiatives, conferences that we have to attend within basically the next 2 months. The first of which is a meeting, first of its kind, arranged by the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization of Commonwealth technical ministers like myself and portfolios of that type, to discuss urgent matters that are affecting the Commonwealth region. And believe it or not, the first thing on the agenda is ubiquitous broadband across the region, basically broadband for all. So we are going to sit together in London for a couple of days and thrash through all of the things coming from individual members of the Commonwealth as to what issues we're having, and you'll be surprised to see from the preliminary information we have that actually the issues are very common. And how are we going to approach that as a Commonwealth, and where we are going to go with that? What does that read down to? Well, what we'll get out of that really specifically is the fact that we will now be able to have and draw upon a larger pool of resources in terms of not just financing is one thing, but really and truly drawing upon a pool of technical resources, drawing upon a pool of best practices, drawing upon a pool of people who are like-minded and thinking and of similar purpose to be able to achieve or work towards the achievement of that. Second meeting is really deals with the ITU. It's the plenipot meeting. It's the first meeting that they're going to have in person for some time. This meeting is every 4 years. And many of the significant posts in the ITU up for renewal at that meeting. It is interesting that there is a pre-meeting of ministers of that to discuss very much the issues that surround what is happening across all the member states of the ITU, and that would be just over 100 of them. There are 14 member states, I think, of the Caribbean associated with that. In that forum, just so you understand it, Trinidad and Tobago is one member state with over 1.5, 1.6 billion people. And then you have the United States with its 33 how many billion. And they also have one vote. So you would understand the gravity of where that is and the influence that 14 Caribbean states can have in those things. And so based on the meetings we had yesterday, the Caribbean Union had its meeting yesterday, the CTU. And many of those 14 countries will be represented at that meeting, where we can influence the things that are going to happen with the ITU, with the Caribbean as a region. So we'll be at that meeting, and I'll be there for the voting, etc., as well as a lot of the, I guess, negotiations that will happen with that. Apart from that, also, there is a mission that we're having to Estonia, organized by the OAS. There are 6 of us that are going to be there. It is being done in English, even though a number of the other participating countries are Spanish-speaking. And the idea behind that also is that you will be well aware that the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Estonia has an MOU established to assist us with significant areas of our ICT. That program is well underway, and we're taking full advantage of that. There are significant resources on the ground here, and a number of initiatives that involve the private sector and other members of government that have already stepped off in that. It's primarily dealing with our interconnectivity network, as well as what we're doing with the e-identity as well. So that mission really is for us to have a very close first-hand look at how this has been really used and utilized within Estonia itself, but more so to meet with all of the major technical companies that form the Estonian cluster, of which we have access to in the build and creation of what we're doing. This also will redound to, because of our relationships with the CTU and the CTO, all of what we learn and what we know will also be now available to the rest of the Caribbean diaspora in terms of what that is. What do we get out of that? Well, very few of the mistakes that Estonia would have made I would expect us to repeat, because we would have, of course, the ability to question them as to where they are, and they will tell you that they have had some issues with what they do. We also get the benefit of speaking to some of the very significant cybersecurity experts in the world working within that region, and you would understand why they have to be very protective because of where they are. They are a landlocked country and adjacent to various types of characters who may want to do them harm. Again, that will work to what we do here. And of course, many of you may not know, but yesterday with the elections that happened at the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, Trinidad and Tobago has been elected as the president seat for that, which I will occupy, and Grenada now occupies the vice president seat. So there's lots happening in where we are, and I guess there's a lot more I can tell, but this is really just to give you an idea of what we've done at a very high level and how all of those things are flowing into some of the travel that myself and the team will be embarking on very shortly. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Asa. Let us go to Minister Gadsby Dolly now.
Good afternoon, everyone, to the media and to our viewing and listening audience, and to my colleagues. The Cabinet today would have reviewed the results of the CSEC and CAPE examinations. Those are the CXC examinations that are the terminal examinations at the level of the secondary school. And they would have received the detailed information with respect to our performance. Some of this was already shared with the general public, but I just want to reiterate as we speak to the juxtaposition of that and the SEA results. So, for example, in CAPE, we would have had a slight increase in the number of acceptable grades, which means that more of the subject entries that were written were passing grades. That's 94.3% as opposed to 93% in 2021. However, with regard to the quality of the grades, you had a slight decrease. We had 70.7% obtaining grades 1, 2, and 3, which are the higher grades in CAPE, and 72% in 2021. In terms of CSEC, we had a slight decrease in both the number of passing grades as well as the quality of the grades. And one of the statistics that we have to bear in mind, which is very important, would be the number of students who attempted 5 or more subjects with math and English. So that's the full certificate, 5 subjects, math and English. And you had a slight decrease because in 2021, we had 46.5% of those students attaining that full certificate. In 2022, it is 43.66. So though the statistics are not as stark and the decreases in terms of how we saw it for SEA, we are still noting that as something that we have to look at. And we understand the situation with this because these are students who would have been exposed to 2 years at home, and we really want to congratulate our students. It has been a long haul, and congratulate their teachers and their parents, because all of us have had to participate in ensuring that our children are well supported to be able to make it there. And I can tell you, I had a daughter doing both CSEC last year as well as CAPE this year, so I fully understand the challenges our students have had to face at this time. So in terms of the measures to deal with learning loss, and this is something that we have spoken to before, but I think it's important for us to keep saying what the ministry is dealing with. You would have seen us institute the Vacation Revision Program, and that has been geared to deal with students who are underprepared, leaving primary school, going into secondary school. This year was the first year of that program, and we intend to continue that program. We are going to go to Cabinet with a report on the program, and so we are asking parents to look out for it as another milestone on the educational landscape that children can benefit from. Look out for it, plan for it, so that our students can have that engagement even during the vacation period. So I want to just go through quickly the measures to deal with learning loss. Following on from the VRP, of course, that program is a 4-week program. and that is meant to engage the students during the vacation period. However, it cannot address the longer-term learning loss that must be engaged, and so we have had a look at 26 schools that we want to focus on for this academic year. Those 26 schools, we want to look at certain areas of their operations. And a document has been written. It's on our website. It's available to the schools as well, so that they understand. We've met with the principals of the schools to discuss in depth how we approach this. And so that involves the training of teachers. Principals have spoken to us about the different things that are required. So the training schedule for the Ministry of Education will be available to schools by next week, so that schools can plan, parents, students, teachers, administrators can plan to be engaged in professional development that is offered by the ministry. In addition to that, these schools have been assigned 3 learning support assistants, and they are to assist with the teachers. They are not teachers, but they are to assist in the classroom, and so that will allow the schools a little more leeway in terms of supervision, focus on certain students, and so on. The timetable adjustment for the operations of the school-based intervention team. This is part of the school-based management. It's not a new thing. However, that is critical because that team is comprised of the principals, certain teachers of the school, as well as the SSSD personnel. And they look and take recommendations about students, their comportment, their achievement, and that is the team that is supposed to identify from early what is happening in terms of students and their needs, and where we need to apply more focus, or it may be a teacher reaching out for more support. But that team has not been operating as well as it can, and so we want to ensure that the timetable is adjusted within the school day to allow for that team to meet in these 26 critical schools, because the schools must take a look at what's happening. They must be allowed that time to be able to give the focus to the children. With respect to the student support personnel, a dedicated school social worker and guidance counselor has been assigned to the schools, and the special education instructor, they are assigned to specific clusters, and we are doing what we can now, recruitment, to hire more of these persons so that the schools will have access to these personnel. And that's why the school-based intervention team is so important, because when you identify the students who need support through that mechanism, they can have the early intervention, because what we have been hearing from our student support services is that sometimes the students should have been referred a long time ago when the problem was a lot smaller, and it could have been dealt with before it blows up into a big issue. The parenting and education, that also comes out of student support services. That is also to be instituted in all of the schools. We've reached out to the National PTA, and we will have further discussions with them on ensuring that the schools have a functioning PTA, because the NPTA also has plans to intervene in schools and that kind of thing. And we want to partner with them as the ministry, and also to add what we can to their programming in these schools so that we can reach the students. The reinforcement and teaching of positive behavior. It may surprise some, but there are some of these children who we see behaving in ways that we would not recommend, but sometimes they do not know better. And it is something that we have to focus on, teaching positive behavior, reinforcing it, and that is a part of the revised school discipline matrix that has been approved by Cabinet. We would have met with the multidisciplinary team, Ministry of Youth Development, Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Sport and Community Development, the Children's Authority, Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs. We would have met with all of these ministries, of course the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as well. We would have come up with that discipline matrix, which not only deals with negative behavior, and ensuring that we have a zero tolerance policy on that, but it also deals with reinforcing positive behavior and explicitly teaching positive behavior, because some of our children really need to understand how they are supposed to behave in certain circumstances. So that's part of the training of the teachers, to ensure that they understand what to do, how to encourage, how to reinforce, and that's part of it as well. As a part of this, we are also reaching out, and we have reached out to the Defence Force, to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the paramilitary organizations, Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, cadets, to be able to ensure that in the schools we have these things operating. because the children need to be engaged, and we have to find positive ways to engage them right where they are. And we also want to bring the personnel into the schools, and very soon we'll be making a call to the public and asking for persons who would want to come to speak to children. Of course, we will have certain guidelines and be vetting and so on, but our children need positive role models. They need to be able to identify with people who have had their challenges and they have been able to surmount them. So that will be a part of the life skills program that is timetabled into the timetable for these schools. So the curriculum adjustments as well, in order to ensure that our students who are going into the secondary schools not necessarily prepared for that syllabus, we have given 2 years for our students to obtain the fundamentals of their numeracy and their literacy skills. And so these students would be enrolled in Form 2 for what was formerly called the primary school leaving. That certification will be the lower secondary proficiency examination. Lower secondary proficiency examination. It's not the SEA. The SEA is not a certification. That's a placement exam. They've done that. They're into the secondary schools, but they have not developed the kinds of skills that are required. And in the same way that students, before long ago, they would go to a 7th standard or post-primary, and they would have time to develop those skills, that's what is required to be done. I want to tell the population that these students who are not fully prepared for secondary school, they are at risk for dropping out with nothing at all, no certification at all. And when we have that situation, I want us to think forward to a couple years when we are looking for professionals on our national landscape to take up the jobs that are required to carry us forward. As an independent nation, we have to produce the professionals that we need. And if we have a large component of our students coming out of our system underprepared to do that, to contribute in a positive way, we are going to have a serious issue. So rather than hide our heads in the sand and say, you know what, we are going ahead with the system as it is, we have to look back and say, we have these students across schools in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have to ensure that they at least develop literacy and numeracy. And this lower secondary proficiency examination, that's a certification that is the qualification for the lower level jobs in the public service. So it is not the SC, I want to make that very clear. It is a certification giving them enough time to develop fundamental critical skills so that by the time they reach Form 2, they do that examination and they have that certification. We are sure that they can now progress, and then they progress to ensure that they have, with an adjusted curriculum, at least they can achieve CXC Math and English and some of the CVQs, HSB, integrated science. So it is something that is done at the secondary schools now. Principals take that initiative to do it. What we are saying now is that we are formalizing it and supporting it and resourcing the schools to be able to do that, to give our children a chance of equity in educational opportunity. So that is one of the major things that is happening at the secondary schools. With respect to the infrastructure at the schools, it is important that we take a critical look at these schools, and we start with the first 26 and deal with the infrastructure. There are some, let me tell you, in terms of infrastructure with our schools, we have 208 ECCE schools, 453 primary, 125 secondary. That's Trinidad figures. 59% of the primary schools are over 40 years old. 42% are over 60 years old. In the secondary schools, we have 51% over 40 years old and 18% over 60 years old. And that means that there are a lot of schools that need a lot of work. Hundreds of schools needing critical infrastructural work. And so in these secondary schools, where the students are greatly engaged by the skills and the labs, we need to ensure that the labs are in order, the sporting fields are in order, the vapor spaces are in order, because these are the subjects that we want to engage our students with. There's a high attrition rate, could be up to 25% in schools where students are underprepared for secondary school. And a lot of that There are a number of factors that contribute to that, but a lot of those factors are because the children feel disengaged. And the skills are a part of bringing them in. Sports is a part. The creative arts, those are some of the subjects that keep them engaged. And so we want to ensure that these schools have the resources to be able to engage our students. I want to just touch on infrastructural work now. During the July-August period, we would have attempted 147 projects across schools at a cost of 45 million. With regard to the number of projects that are ongoing in schools that would have schools not open, we have 5 that are ongoing, and the schools are closed to be able to complete that work. All of those schools should be carded to open by next week, and well, all things being equal. And we have 3 schools that are presently closed. On a daily basis, we have issues of sewer, electrical things, that emergencies that come up. So 3 are currently closed for that reason, and so those are being addressed. So there are 8 schools out of the over 800 schools that we have, and we are addressing issues there. But there are also other schools where work is ongoing that does not impact the operation of the school, and so they are going on, and that is a process that always continues. So there's always, at any one point in time, work going on at quite a number of schools in our country, and at any point in time, you may have an issue arising because of the age of some of our schools. A sewer plant may go down, and the critical ones are sewer, electrical, plumbing. When you have those issues, a school may have to close to be able to address those 1 day, 2 days, and then the school is reinstated. So those are the updates I'd like to give at this time, and I know we'll have a lot of questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think you're right. I suspect we will have a few questions. Let me open the floor to the members of media here. If you all would not mind, especially for the benefit of Minister Bacchus, who is with us for the first time, if you just give your name and the media house you're representing. Thank you.
All right, Ryan Hamilton Davis, Trinidad Newsday. I have a few. Well, the first one for Minister Bacchus. Can you expand on exactly what will be done to actually streamline the end-to-end service, especially in the public, and especially in government public service pages and stuff like that?
Sure. Some of the fundamentals of good design for service delivery mean that you have to build things in from the beginning. So resilience has to be built in from the beginning. All of your factors that would influence things that involve the economy must be built in. Anything that will impact how the service is delivered must be built in. So how do we do that? Well, if you look at the maturity of any digitally delivered service, you will find that it goes from very little to deep. So when we say end-to-end, we mean that it must be fully mature. Give you a good example. If you want to do something, one of the first things that happens if you want to interact with it, somebody might tell you you can make an appointment online. That represents a first stage. But that's all you're able to do. You're only able to make the appointment. You can't complete the transaction online. When we talk about end-to-end, when we build the processes that are associated with the services that we're going to do, it is that you can start and complete your transaction online. A simple one would be renewal of a driver's permit, as an example. If there's some reason that you need to go in, that's fine. If it's a first application, you have to take an exam. There's some reason they want to see you to validate yourself. But if you're a holder like me and you just want to renew it, you already have your picture. You can submit another one online. You can fill the form online. You can make the payment online. And you probably could have it delivered to you via TT Post. That's what I mean by end-to-end. So end-to-end, and that's why we have to interconnect the ministries for the exchange of information. End-to-end means that you can start and complete your transaction given a remote medium if you choose so to do. But it may involve things that are not necessarily within this ministry. And it would also involve things that involve transactions of money, etc. So all of those things have to be factored in when we're building, as we talk about services, end to ensure that we have created the guidelines. We're working with our other ministries, divisions, and agencies who already have services that now have to be brought in line and in alignment with that end-to-end philosophy, and that's what we're doing now.
I just want to expand a little bit further, just to get some more of an idea of how you guys will be planning on filling certain gaps. I'm glad you brought up the idea of appointment. In some districts, something as simple as an ID card, the ID card office would be booked up till quite January. You go to make an appointment, you make the appointment, you reach to the place where you have the appointment. You still have to wait an entire hour to actually have that appointment filled. How can you streamline those simple gaps in the first instance? Well, you can tell me about the expansion.
So think about it. When I started, I mentioned 4 things: people, process, plant and machinery, and legislation. In any of the things that you're talking about, all 4 of those things come into play. Restrictions on the number of appointments would have been guided, particularly over the last 2 years, by COVID. The number of appointments you can give is not a limitation of the technology. It's a limitation of how many people can address the amount of people that you need to see. And in the case of COVID, how many people will allow into a room. So you have to understand that appointment systems are not only ways to identify people, but they are also mechanisms of control. So that's one thing. But if you want to have what we're talking about getting from end to end, you have to alter the processes. So we have significant amounts of process design, process re-engineering, process retirement happening. Because even if you put technology on top of old processes, you're probably going to end up in the same place. What we need to do is to build digital processes, which is what we're doing now, revamping that. Strangely enough, the technology is quite simple. The technology is not the difficult part. These things happen all over the world. The thing is, it is the adjustments in the processes and the change management aspect of the people. That is what is going to make it work. And that is what we've been working on and placing tremendous emphasis on. And that's why it will be different. You maybe talk about a new way. That's why it will be different. This is process-built, process-driven, people-minded adjustment. The technology is there.
Keyshan Haynes, Guardian Media. Okay, so let's build on that. A lot of it talks about change management of people. One of the things that's going to happen once you start digitizing everything and moving everything, you're going to have to look at either upskilling or outskilling. So some people are going to lose their jobs. When that happens, the unions are going to fight back, and this is how we have, remain this. What processes are you putting in place to ensure that this doesn't happen, that there is not so much kickback that we end up in the same place after more than 5 years?
The ministry has, for a ministry of a technology-based ministry, we have, I think a lot of people have said, we have very strange core values. One of them is trust. One of them is hope. We have transparency. We have things that are relative to your ability to adapt and work quickly. And that's strange for a ministry of this type. Technology scares people, and I think you've identified part of that fear. Does technology replace me? Do I become obsolete? How do I fit in this world? The digital society part of that plays a good part of that, because one of the ways that we have to fix that is through Simon, it's through communication. Another way that we have to fix that is through education. The media has a big part to do with that. But to address what you're saying specifically, let me give you an example. And why it is, I think, in every revolution, there is always some level of fallout. There's no question about that. Every revolution. We are in the 4th Industrial Revolution, there will be a 5th. And that fallout is not necessarily to say that things go away. It means that you have to be able to adapt. And so part of our training thing will work on that. But think about this. You walk into an office and somebody has a sheet of paper. Obviously, I'm a digital guy, I don't have any paper. But I have a sheet of paper. And what you're doing in that office is that you are going to that office to fill out a form to get something. Let's use an example of a grant. You've gone, you filled out the form, and you give it to someone behind the desk. Their job is to ensure that you've filled out all of the things associated with it and then file it away or put it for further action. That's a job. One of the things that technology could do is replace that job. Simply says, fill out this form online, do it a different way. So you say, well, that person then becomes obsolete. That is not true. Let me give you an example of what that person now knows. Because they've been doing that for some time, I'm absolutely sure they know every single form that the ministry has for associated with grants. They also know, more than likely, when people are coming in and saying, we're applying for this and it's the wrong thing, because the government has so many grants, and I will tell you so many, and people sometimes mistake the ministries in which they need to go. So you take that person who already knows all the forms. You have a digital front that now accepts all of the information from you, and all you ask that person to do is to address the fallouts. Why would something fall out? The application is in the wrong ministry. You're applying for the wrong type of relief for what this is, and they will know that. All they have to do is simply look at the fallouts and say, all right, you know what happened here? This person is applying for the wrong grant. This should be in the Ministry of Finance. This person is applying for the wrong grant. This should be with the Ministry of Works. And then using a simple upgrade of being able to use a computer to access with the person's contact information, that person who was simply just collecting a form and looking at it and can now have a more fulfilling job of being able to contact you if it was you, Kijan, and say, listen, we've noticed you've applied for this particular thing. You've applied in the wrong place. I can help you fix it. What does that do? It's the same person, minimal upskilling. They have a more fulfilling job as far as they are concerned in terms of what they're doing. But more than that, the service for which they wanted to access from the state is now being made available for them in a better way. That is the mechanism we want people to start to think of it. What you have is not useless. What you need to do is to find a way to work in this new world. And lastly, in this fourth industrial revolution, more jobs have been created than in any one before. If you go on to any one of your favorite jobs, LinkedIn, and you will see thousands upon thousands of jobs. They just require shifts in what you're doing. New opportunities for everyone.
Well, okay, so let's tap back to something that you said. You have a mission to Estonia. Yeah. This MOU was signed more than 2 years ago, if I recall. One of the major things that the Prime Minister campaigned on in 2020 was this digital card. One card where all the information should be there, pushed on that. I think Estonia was to come on that. Realistically speaking, at the pace that everything is going, is this something that can happen within this term of office, under this second term that goes until 2025?
So let me correct and then answer. So we tend to live in a card world. People like cards. The unique identifier, a personal unique identifier, does not necessarily have to be card-based. What he did say is that we will be able to identify everyone here. You have probably in your wallet a driver's permit, an ID card. At home, you probably have a passport. None of those things uniquely identify you to the state. You have a driver's permit because you want to drive, and if a driver's license, I withdraw it. It has been changed. You have a driver's license because you want to drive. Well, that identifies you to the Ministry of Works and Transport. You have an ID card, well, it's Election and Boundaries Commission, that's registry. You have a passport, that's Immigration, Ministry of National Security, in case you want to travel. That's why when you go to a bank, they ask you for 2 forms of ID and still want something else to prove of address. It's because, rarely and truly, you have a birth certificate. Well, that is even worse, because it has no picture of you. So if I walk into a place with your birth certificate, you'll understand why I have to verify it another way. The reason for that is that, one, we need to be able to identify everyone at a unique level because there are advantages of it for you. And those advantages are that when you approach the state for services, it means that we can identify you and assign services specifically for you. If you go into the hospital in Port of Spain and you go into the hospital in Scarborough, Tobago, they are supposed to be able to recognize that you are you. So that is not necessarily card-based. That is being able to uniquely identify yourself. And we're going to use some very sophisticated technology to do that, using what we call immutable ledgers and things that really and truly we don't need to go into here. Why is Estonia involved? Well, Estonia is involved because they are one of the best at this in the world. We have had to establish, apart from the MOU, there are other, and remember, people, process, systems, and the law. There are other legal things that you have to do to be able to access the type of assistance that we need to what we have. We had to identify Trinidad and Tobago's readiness to be able to accept and use those things. We had to evaluate the existing infrastructure capabilities in Trinidad and Tobago to see what are we going to put this thing in. We had to measure the receptivity of people, whether or not they would like to use digital services and whether they are capable of doing so, which is measuring the digital IQ of our citizens. All of that has been happening while we've been negotiating with the government of Estonia of the major companies, these world-class companies that make up their cluster. Which of those companies are the ones that are going to be working with us on the major things we have? They are already here on the ground. They've completed a significant part of their work. We are getting to the phase where we are going to have a pilot in place. And in that pilot, what are we going to do? Having an identity that says who you are is pretty much useless unless you want to use it for something. So in the use cases that we're going to have, we're going to partner with ministries. Partner with the Ministry of Social Family Services, Social Development. That's a good one. That's a good way for you to be able to identify you as you for grants. Yeah, it's a good place to start. Continue working with places like we're already working with the Licensing Division, Ministry of Works and Transport. So all of those things are dependent on those underlying things that I mentioned. That interoperability layer for the exchange of information, the designs are pretty much going on now. We're working with our technical partners on the implementation arms race. Why did we have to go through the original pieces? Trinidad and Tobago, you may not know, has 4 Tier 3 certified data centers on island. You knew that? 4? You would have known 3, because one only got certified in the last week or so. But then you would have found that out. Yeah, so it's 4. We have very few islands in the Caribbean that have 2. We have 4. Why is that impacting for us? Should we be in a hurry to create the 5th, which is specific to the government? Or should we leverage those existing 4 for the purposes for which we have in terms of speed and readiness to put it?
But the reason I ask, and hear me out, we are a nation where if the government changes and the government does not have the same vision as the previous government, we are back at square one. So all of this that you are building,
My mandate does not extend.
But
my mandate does not extend beyond the natural life of this government. So I have to finish, not trying, I will finish what I have to do within that time frame. But understand what I'm saying. That doesn't mean that Trinidad and Tobago will be digitally transformed come 2025. It means we will be well on the way there, and the things that will be put in place, regardless of which regime takes over or if we continue, will be very difficult to replace, because by then it will be integral in how you function and interact, not just among yourselves, but with the state as well.
How would you respond to people who may be skeptical because they looked at the digital card for vaccinations last year as an easy start, a little run-up, a little test, and we heard it coming in 6 weeks, then it was 6 months, and then it just, well, I don't think we need it anymore. But what people thought was that that simple digital vaccination card, are you vaccinated, yes or no, was a good jump-off point. And it didn't seem that we got that. So what do you say to people who will be extremely skeptical that if we can't do what is seemingly easy to do all of this big thing?
It's interesting. The things that are seemingly easy are not always the easiest things. So you are saying that to accurately vaccinate as many people as you can in a shorter space as you can, get the records done, massage them into a database, generate something while securing all of the data to make sure it's not transposed anywhere else and it is not compromised in any way. Ensuring that even though we don't know that you are you, other than the fact that you have presented something for where you are, vaccinating people without IDs because we want to get shots in arms where the actual focus of it was that. And then produce it, and that is simple. So no, I'm just giving. What I'm saying is, what appears simple represents something that is, or when you on the surface it is. I can tell you this: the technology was always ready, and it has been ready, and it still is ready. So the technology was not the problem. One of the things that we have to ensure that whenever we do anything, that it is fit for purpose and that it can stand scrutiny. What we found is that there was an unacceptable. I said this in the Senate. There was apart from the fact that there were problems with the underlying security issues which were addressed, these were global issues. We had issues with the quality of the information that was contained in the database. It meant there was an automated system, end to end. You would apply for it online and you would get it online. But we found an unacceptable level of fallout because the information in the database was inconsistent. So we took the time to fix it. Now, why is that important to you? If you're getting a fallout rate beyond what is an internationally accepted norm, you have no choice but to fix it. It meant that if we didn't do that and you applied for your card, it meant that you would have to end up in a queued process to get it. And what it would do is frustrate you. Why? No, it can't be. Because you were still able to use what you had, which was the physical card you got when you got vaccinated. Why it was of particular interest to us, and just to clear it up, is that if we wanted to continue, the reason why we would have launched it and can still launch it is if there were countries who would not accept the things that we have and would only accept an electronic certificate that had a QR code in it. And we were searching that. We had the Ministry of Foreign Affairs look through that. We haven't been able to do that. Obviously, by now, the COVID thing has waned. And so the reason why we can still launch it is that it would represent a secure way in which your vaccination record for COVID can be held. But think about if you lose your vaccination certificate that you've had for a child now, the card, you could recreate it. I don't think anybody can. And so the idea would be now to expand that to now include those kinds of things. That is why it hasn't been launched. But it could have been launched.
Kijan, I mean, just move on to something.
Sorry. I'm sorry. No, we forget the minister. She gets enough.
Prime Minister, similar activity news to Minister Gazvidoli in terms of the proficiency exam. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you said this has been a part of the secondary school already. Can you say how long this has been a part of it? And is it going to be basically mandatory now to move on to the other forms?
Yeah, this is the primary school leaving exam. It's been a part of our system for many years. It's not a new thing. And yes, so we are mandating that the students who have performed under a certain level at SCA from this year, they register for it. But the secondary schools, many of them would do it. Not necessarily for everyone, but they would expose some parents to it. But we want to ensure that our students are able to do that. So, yeah.
Update for the turnout. I know the turnout was better on Tuesday than Monday. Any update on that in terms of how the percentages were based on the students and parents so far?
Yeah, we're up to 80-something, 90-something% at both primary and secondary school.
This is still very much an issue because we're seeing hundreds of cases daily. Any update in terms of how the schools have been going? Any cases for the week so far?
We usually get a report at the end of the week. The schools, the entry protocols are in place at the schools, and so we ask, even though masking is not mandatory, we're asking persons to be highly recommending wear your mask and so on. And we have all the hand washing. All of that is still in place at the schools, and the nurses of the districts are still monitoring and still giving guidance to principals and so on. So everything that was in place is still in place at schools.
Minister, in a lot of the initiatives that he explained earlier on was in the spirit of retaining talent, especially from the educational level go up. All right. Now, in that same spirit, was there any kind of conversation or discussion on making another review of these scholarships that are available, so that there would be a lot more attractiveness for students who are succeeding to stay local instead of looking for scholarships elsewhere?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
from what I recall, there was a review of the number of scholarships available.
There were 100 scholarships and 500 bursaries. So we've just awarded for this year, for those who did CAPE in 2021, 100 scholarships they were awarded earlier this year, and 355 bursaries were already awarded this year.
Just to follow up on the question of the lower secondary proficiency exam and the vacation program. Now, it wasn't mandatory, so you had a lot of people who did not come out. Is there a plan to make it mandatory? And if there is, or I'm going forward, even if it's not, how do you plan to balance the shame? Because what we understood was that a lot of parents came to us and was like, well, I don't want my child to be shamed like this because they know they're in summer school and that kind of stuff. Is that something that you've heard, and how do you think that that can be dealt with in the future to ensure that people are coming to this thing which is for their benefit?
First, I want parents to release themselves from the burden of blame, because the shame sometimes comes from blame. And we have to understand that this is a global phenomenon. And we are not the only country that is offering makeup opportunities for our children. When there is the offer of private examinations in January, let's say, these are generally patronized by persons who may not have achieved what they expected to in their usual examinations. And there certainly is no shame in that, because you see many people taking up that opportunity. And so what I want to say to parents, first, release yourself from the blame. This pandemic was hard on everyone. And many of our children may have performed what we consider subpar based on what their potential is. But this was the best that they could do at this time based on the challenges that they faced. So first thing, parents, don't blame yourself for your children not performing as well as you thought they should. The second thing is that we have to accept what is. And if some of our children didn't do as well as they could or they should have, we have to accept that and seek the help that is required. And it is the same thing when, for example, a domestic violence situation comes up. Sometimes there's shame, and persons don't want to seek the help that's available. But if we stay in that mood, then we're not going to get to our children what is required for them. So I want to say to parents, it is disappointing in some cases, it is frustrating in some cases, and yes, you may feel embarrassed, but there is a worse shame involved in an adult who is underprepared to take care of themselves. There's a worse shame involved when we have children who are misbehaving, and then you have to get the law enforcement involved. So let's not allow ourselves to take the disappointment and the blame and the shame and allow that to prevent us from allowing our children to get the benefit of what is offered to them.
And on the topic of schools and the repair program, there were two protests today. One was in Claxton Bay. There was an issue where, let me read it properly, the Claxton Bay Junior and...
I can tell you, it's a decanted school. We have 40 decanted schools, and it's a decanted school, so school is ongoing at another location. However, the parents are asking about the school that needs to be repaired, and we have 40 such schools. We have many others that have to be done, but we have 40 such schools where the children are at a different location. So even while school is ongoing, the parents did have a protest today to ask for the repairs to the old school. And so that old school is carded for repair. It's carded for a prefabricated building, and we have asked for the allocation to be able to do that and complete some other critical repairs to some of our schools in the fiscal coming up.
What about the transportation between there and Marabella, where they complain that it's not reliable?
Transportation depends on the information supplied to us by the principal so that PTSC can arrange the transport. As you know, it's a PTSC collaboration between the Ministry of Education. So the PTSC is working on assigning the transport. The information would have been requested on the 1st of September when primary school principals came off vacation. And so they would have sent in their information, and PTSC is working on allocating the concessionaires at this time.
a protest in Southeast Port of Spain. Are you aware of it? Would you have any comment on that?
Southeast Port of Spain is a school that's ongoing, where repairs are ongoing. They have some roofing repairs ongoing at this time. They would have opened for 2 days, but we have closed to allow that to continue very quickly so that they can reopen next week.
All right. One last question from me, at least. I really wish the acting Prime Minister was here to ask this, but I guess we'll have to go to the office of the Prime Minister. Yeah. There was a serious complaint made by the chairman of the joint commission of inquiry of not having basic amenities, pens, pencils, internet, those kinds of things. Can the office of the Prime Minister give a response and tell us whether or not these issues are being addressed, who's responsible, why they didn't do anything, those things.
So I want to tell you that obviously I did see the comments as they were being made, and one could not miss it because it was on the front page of every newspaper. What I do not want to do is to focus on the matter of blame as to why something was done. What I can tell you is that I have spoken to the persons who are responsible for delivering, and there were a few things that were addressed, or a few issues that were raised. The issue of stationery, it is my understanding that that is to be delivered or will be delivered to them, if not today, by first thing in the morning. The issue of workstations is currently being addressed, as far as I have been informed today. The issue of the internet connection, as far as I have been informed today, was originally carded to be completed tomorrow. It is being fast-tracked for it to be addressed today. It is unfortunate that these matters had to be addressed today and were not done previous, but we have taken all steps to ensure that the office will be able to operate as an office with all the necessary inputs.
For confirmation, you say you spoke to the persons who were responsible. Which office is responsible? Because we asked the AG directed us to the president. The president say it's not me. Whose office does it fall under?
You have gotten an answer from the Minister of Communications in the Office of the Prime Minister. Let us leave it at that. In ascribing the responsibility, it will be reported as ascribing the blame. What I would like to do is to draw a line, having seen the issue, having obviously been concerned by it. I followed up on it today, and my understanding is that the next time that Mr. Lynch comes to speak, he should be able to speak from a position of having had the issues identified, addressed in the fastest possible manner.
Now, is it that Mr. Lynch did not know who to address? Because I can't imagine that weeks would have passed and he would have known that he had no internet, no pens, and he wouldn't have reached out to anyone. So do you know who he might have reached out to?
So I can't say that. I can't say that. All I can say is what I have. That we've identified the issues. That the issues weren't identified in the public domain. Having done that, it has been addressed, and those things will be dealt with.
Now that being said, so all of these things, nothing is free. These things cost money. Whose budget does it come out of?
Kijan, no matter how many ways you get to it, I've already said what I have to say. All right, it is important, and there was, as far as I can recollect, there was a budget assigned to this. I am sure that these things will fall under that. I don't think a question in terms of the stationery, what the cost of the stationery is, and all these things is something that we need to deal with now. It is about him having it.
Well, and you said that it is there, it's going to happen. So that now...
I said it's going to happen. I said, as far as I've been informed, they are either there, being installed, or will be by tomorrow.
Now, what do you say to the public? Because we have a public that's already extremely skeptical that anything coming out of this will be fair and balanced. Whether or not it's justified, that is the perception. And then this comes yesterday, and it further compounds that belief that this is a cover-up and the government doesn't care. What do you say to those people who believe that, and what would you say to allay their fears that, well, what do you say to those people?
Well, my first position is that this is not a general perception. Of course, there will be persons who, and we see it daily, especially we see it as the government, we see daily that there are people in the public domain whose intention is to try to undermine every aspect of authority, every aspect of the good news that government is trying to deliver. This, of course, is something that is separate and apart from government. It must remain to be that. So all we can do is to ensure that the necessary infrastructure is in place. If it is not, and it has been identified that some of the things were not there, that we ensure that that is done. We allow the Commission of Inquiry to do its business. And one of the best things that I can do, especially as a politician, given what you have said, is to try to limit my comments on this to just the bare minimum, to say that we have done what we have to do, and let us see it take its course.
Can you at least tell us what went wrong in the entire situation? Was it a communication problem? Was it an ICT problem?
Well, again, my focus in trying to ensure that, one, what needed to be done was done, and two, that I came here to be able to report some manner of a timeline was to not speak about, or not necessarily focus on the why did this go wrong. My job, especially here right now and speaking to you all, is to say that how can we get it done, make sure that it is being done, and come to tell you that it is being done.
I noted two things that was said. The Commissioner thanked UDCOT, or he called out Noel Garcia specifically. He also thanked Stuart Young for grading the office. I'm glad we still have chairs as well. But those two offices fall under the office of the Prime Minister. So can I put two and two together and say that the office of the Prime Minister has a lot more responsibility in this than you're letting on?
Well, the Minister of Communications is the Minister in the office of the Prime Minister. All I can do is report as to what is being done. And again, I am not here to ascribe blame to any ministry, division, or agency. I am simply here to say that having identified the issues, they are being taken care of, and that the next time that Mr. Lynch speaks, I am positive he will be able to speak from a position of having been able to say this was addressed in the fastest possible time, having made it an issue in the public domain. All right. So I want to thank you. On that note, I want to thank the members here, the members of the media who are present. I want to thank our viewing and listening public for joining us today. We thank you and thank you for the questions, the media, and we look forward to engaging with you all again. Goodbye.
The winning numbers in the National Lottery online draws for Thursday, 8th September 2020.